Earlier this year, the fan-made Eddsworld episode, Best of Both Worlds, was deleted from YouTube. And I don't just mean it's been unlisted either. It was set to private, so even if you have a link to the original upload, it is only visible by the channel creator. All that remains is this unofficial re-upload of one of the most iconic fan creations in Eddsworld history. So what happened? I was in complete shock when I heard about this episode's deletion. Best of Both Worlds is easily one of the most popular Eddsworld related things to ever come out of the fanbase. One person in my own comment section even called it their favourite Eddsworld episode, although they did get the name wrong. That's how faithful of an episode this is. Even if you don't particularly love it, you can't deny the widespread appeal that this episode has had. And if you're an Eddsworld fan, I'm sure that you already know what it is. To understand why this episode was deleted, we need to go back to the beginning. And along the way, we might just cover what this video's deletion means for the Eddsworld community, diversity and representation in the media, and the future of Eddsworld itself. If you've not yet heard of Best of Both Worlds, it was an animated episode from the team working on the Eddsworld fan movie, and it was made in the style of your typical Eddsworld episode. The 10-minute long animation sees the Eddsworld gang enter the gender-flipped Mirrorverse from Mirror Mirror, and they end up meeting their female counterparts. They interact with each other, get into trouble, and generally just goof around until the episode ends. Matt and Matilda go shopping to give Matt a makeover, Tom and Tamara become good mates, and Ed and Elle have this whole romance subplot. It's basically your typical Eddsworld fanfiction, but it is notable for the lengths it went to be as high quality and as loyal to the show's style as possible. Each voice actor nails their original character perfectly, and they even managed to get Ed's sister, Vicky Gould, to voice her character from Mirror Mirror. The animation was also extremely faithful to the show, and in general there's a level of professionalism which is hard to come by in other fan projects. It has this professional feel because it came from a very professional team. The Eddsworld fan movie project has been around since at least 2013, and it was set up with the goal of creating a full-length Eddsworld movie. It was originally planned to release sometime around 2014, but that date's been pushed back by several years for a number of reasons. The history of the Eddsworld fan movie is incredibly complicated and a story for another time. For now though, you just need to know that the movie was being written and directed by Mark Lavollo, but due to internal conflict and creative differences, he has since stepped down, and the project is now being managed by Pip and his assistant director, Colin. Back when Mark was in charge, the channel was making these animated shorts called minisodes alongside the creation of the movie. They were successful and helped tide the fans over between updates on the full film, but none were quite as ambitious as Best of Both Worlds. It was much longer and it had a proper storyline, something you could call a full episode. And when it released, it became popular. Very popular. It's hard to say exactly how many views it had, but to my recollection, it had multiple millions of views, at least on par with the numbers on some official Eddsworld videos. To put it in perspective, a video just listing some of the references and Easter egg in that episode has 1.7 million views right now. And my own video on the same topic, released a couple months later, has around 100,000 views. It was sort of my thing at the time, making Easter egg related videos. I didn't know that someone had that idea before I did. My video was better though. Not only was this episode popular, it was also incredibly faithful to the show. One could say a little too faithful. Like I said, there were no doubt some people who genuinely thought that Best of Both Worlds was an official creation, as opposed to the fan-made endeavour it actually is. This isn't anything unique. You'd be surprised at how many people think that the end was the last thing that Ed Gould worked on. Being on the internet has taught me to just never assume that fans know this stuff. This authenticity is probably why they later had to put this little graphic in the corner of the thumbnail. I'm pretty sure they actually got into some hot water because of how convincing it looked. I vaguely remember this vlog that was uploaded and then later deleted. I recall the director at the time mentioning that they didn't really have permission to make the minisodes. This was at a time between Mark and Pip, A guy called John Lopez was briefly the director. I think they deleted the update because it was inaccurate after Pip took over. I do remember John specifically mentioning that Matt hadn't given his blessing for more minisodes, so they were going to stop making them, including the ones they already had in production. This might have changed by now, I can't be certain. Like I said, the Eddsworld fan movie has a very, very complicated history. But none of this is why Best of Both Worlds was deleted. It had nothing to do with the authenticity or its popularity. This episode was deleted because it wasn't very good. Okay, that's a bit mean. I actually do enjoy this episode a lot, but it is kinda true. While yes, the episode was incredibly popular, it was never without its criticisms. One YouTuber that I've mentioned in the past who made a great critique of this episode is Riley Levine. That video is a little bit outdated now in regards to what the team are actually doing at the moment, but the criticisms of the episode are still entirely valid. As much as I like this episode, it is far from perfect. The comedy is a bit slow, the dialogue is a bit weak, and the story could have been executed a lot better in some places. There was particular criticism about some of the romance in the episode, and the director received a lot of hate for creating a relationship between some characters where there perhaps shouldn't have been. You might think that I'm being harsh, but this isn't just my opinion. It's a sentiment shared by the current director of the Eddsworld fan movie. When asked about this episode's deletion on Discord, Pip gave this explanation. My biggest issue with Best of Both Worlds, and you can quote me on this, is that the writing for it was a very poor depiction of Eddsworld, and an even worse example of how we'll be handling the movie. As much as I love Mark, he handled that fanisode very poorly, and now that I'm rewriting the script, I don't want more of Best of Both Worlds to be what the fans expect from us. And honestly, it was a shameless ship fanfic episode, and I hated it so much. LOL. LOL indeed, Pip. LOL indeed. Now listen, if you liked the episode, then that is completely fine. I like this episode as well. I sure as hell would be proud if I'd made it. I'm not going to stop you from enjoying it. But as of right now, the director sees it as a very poor representation of what the full movie is going to be. It'd be like showing someone the LEGO Star Wars games and saying, yes, this is what A New Hope looks like. So if you never liked this episode to begin with, and that may be a lot of you, you can expect something very different from the Eddsworld fan movie going forward. You might just be pleasantly surprised when it does release. Although with all this said, I think that this raises one more question. Why did this episode do as well as it did? Why this episode with all of its janky story and imperfect dialogue? There are a number of reasons, I believe, and part of it is the level in which it mimics Eddsworld. Even if Pip thinks it wasn't a good representation of the show, there is no denying that something about the animation and voice acting was very authentic. And I still do think that the writing did feel a lot like older episodes at some points. It had also been about a year since Eddsworld had stopped making videos, and the fans were definitely feeling some level of withdrawal and nostalgia for the show. This episode definitely came at a time when people really wanted to see it. This episode was always going to be popular. It's well put together and it comes from a very high profile place in the community. I am not surprised that it became popular. But I do believe that there is one more reason that this episode in particular did so well. One reason that so many people loved and connected with this piece of animation. And to me, that reason is both strikingly important and blindingly obvious. Eddsworld has a large female audience. As you'd expect, about 50% of the people who watch the show are women. Looking at the audience figures for my own videos, the numbers are very in the middle. On average, there's maybe a greater male audience on a typical video, but it's not by that much. Yet, with this massive demographic, how many memorable female characters are there in this show? Very, very few. Basically, every recurring character in the show is male, and that's understandable. The main characters are based on real people. but so very often we have entire episodes with an only male voice cast. The grand finale of the show, for example, other than a scream from an unnamed woman, an old lady being voiced by a man, and a glorified iPad, there are no voiced women characters. And that is a trend which is surprisingly common with Eddsworld episodes. I think that Best of Both Worlds did as well as it did because it was a great showcase of some of Eddsworld's most memorable female characters. Looking at the analytics on my own video again, nearly 2/3 of people who clicked on it were female. That is an insane difference. Only a handful of my videos have such an imbalance, and they are very unusual for having audience figures like that. Even on the official upload of Mirror Mirror, the number of likes on that video is much higher than episodes with a similar view count. That's more than 25,000 more likes on a video with nearly 2 million fewer views. That is insane. Mirror Mirror is an important episode because it gave a huge number of people memorable characters that they can more easily relate to. Characters that they can latch onto. And that's not even mentioning the cosplay potential for so many fans who, up until that point, had no one to dress up as. Representation matters. It is important that we have stories that we can see ourselves in. And just to be clear, I do not want the people working on the Eddsworld fan movie to just chuck in some token girl character because they feel they have some obligation to do so. They don't. If you think your story is best told with a predominantly male cast, tell it the way you know how to tell it. But all things considered, I do think that Best of Both Worlds struck a chord with a lot of people. And though I don't think the episode was popular because it's about girls, I do think it became as incredibly popular as it did because it explored these great characters that once felt underdeveloped. Mirror Mirror brought these designs to life. Best of Both Worlds gave them character and purpose. And I believe that the Eddsworld team has all this in mind. It wasn't too long ago that Matt expressed an interest in telling more gender-flipped stories. And in fact, they are still making illustrations for Instagram and Twitter. Why not make a few gender-flipped illustrations? I'm sure that a lot of people would be more than happy to see those characters again. I honestly think it's a shame that Best of Both Worlds was deleted. It's understandable. It may not be the perfect episode, but it made a lot of people happy, myself included. If you still really want to see it, then like I said, it has been freebooted onto YouTube. It is completely watchable, just know that the Eddsworld fan movie aren't getting any money from it. Plus it won't be a full representation of what the team has in mind for the future. I personally cannot wait to see how this movie turns out. But if what we've seen from this new crew so far is any indication, I'm sure it will be fantastic.